realities of Reconstruction. Ex-Confederates were unwilling to accept blacks into society. As this picture suggests, many black free people, former slaves, lived in constant fear of the White League, the KKK, white society, and it wasn't necessarily as progressive as one might have hoped. Here, this couple, is cringing, their books are on the ground, and while they may be learning, while they may be outside of schoolhouse, you can see that there are lynchings and other things taking place. The Ku Klux Klan was founded during this time to promote white supremacy. This is a national organization which rises throughout most of the early turn of the century until it reaches prominence in 1920. Many of our former presidents during this time, or many of our presidents during this time, were Ku Klux Klan members. The Union was divided on the best means of reintegration, and this presents a serious problem when we're talking about how to reintegrate. The vote was evaded. While many blacks were legally allowed to vote according to the national amendment, and a constitutional right to vote, whites in the South passed laws which directly disenfranchised blacks. They did things like they required literacy tests, which of course former slaves who were never educated, of course, were not literate, and so they could not, read or pass the test. You don't need to be literate to vote in many ways. You need to be able to read the names of the people, or at least recognize letters enough to vote for the person that you want to vote for. But it's checking a box. It's not, reading a dialogue or something like that. And so literacy tests are continually introduced as a way to disenfranchise people. It's something that people are trying to do today with Mexican immigrants and other things. Grandfather clauses are essentially this idea that if you voted in the last election, you can vote in this next election, which of course former slaves did not vote in the last election because they were not allowed to. And then, of course, poll taxes. If you want to vote, then you have to pay this fee, and that, of course, disenfranchises any poor people from voting. Blacks became citizens, but arguably they became second-class citizens. Lynching. This is a term used to describe mob killing. The KKK had support of local officials and terrorized anyone who voted Republican, which was predominantly northern political party at this point. Lynching became a widespread form of terrorism against African Americans. And just a heads up, I'm going to show you a picture of a lynching in a second. Thousands of black Southerners were lynched between Reconstruction and the 1960s. Some accounts say that there was at least one lynching a week in the South. And of course, immediately following the end of the Civil War, there were many lynchings. And so, again, a lynching is just a mob killing. It's usually public because the people that are doing the lynching don't care. It's not a murder from their perspective. It certainly is a murder. But from their perspective, it's not a murder. It's serving justice to this poor black person who may or may not have done something wrong or deserving of a lynching. This picture is a picture of a mother and a son who were lynched by that mob standing up on the bridge. And in this particular instance, the young man had stolen something. I think it was something like bread. And when the sheriff came to check on him, he was so afraid that he ended up pushing and shoving the sheriff, and somehow the sheriff died. And the boy fled, and when the mob came, they took his mother and said that they were going to kill her if he didn't come back, and so he came back, and they killed both of them anyway. And so these two people were publicly lynched. It's difficult to see this in the picture, but the boy here has his pants pulled down and has obviously been violated in many ways prior to this lynching. So these people are not shy about the fact that they participated in it, and in fact, some ways they're proud of it, and they think that this is justice. This Negro has earned this, and this is the way it goes. This is the way that we deal with things in the South. And obviously, that is a pretty backwards, messed up mentality. And if this boy did, murder somebody, then there are repercussions for that, but they should be followed within the system. And this method of lynching that the KKK took up was treating blacks outside of the system, and sort of treating them the way they would have been treated during slavery. We also see the establishment of Jim Crow laws, which are laws that enforced segregation, and segregation is segregating or separating out whites from blacks in society. Separate and equal was upheld in the Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896, which essentially legalized discrimination against black people. And here you can see a little bit more modern picture of a colored waiting room, where this man is waiting for a bus, and he has to wait in a separate waiting room than other white people. Woodrow Wilson, arguably a strong political president for us, especially internationally, was not a friend to blacks, and urged for the resegregation of Washington, D.C., which had been desegregated during Reconstruction. Today in class, we're going to complete a Reconstruction activity and essentially debate the merits of Reconstruction and whether or not it worked.